Gardner City Council will come to order. If you would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our City Council meeting. There are no presentations this evening. We do have time allotted for public comment. Members of the public are welcome to make comments on items that do not appear on the agenda or that are on the agenda and not part of a public hearing. If you do have comments, please come forward and state your name and address. That being the case, we will move on to the consent agenda. You should have an amended agenda before you were moving item 4 to the new business, so there are 3 items on the agenda. How would council like to proceed with the consent agenda?
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion Harrison, second Freeman, that we approve the consent agenda. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. New business item number 1, consider a rezoning request for Colony's real estate development, Arvest Bank, located at 314 and 324 East Main. Amy.
A rezoning and preliminary development plan for Colony's real estate development, which is to allow the construction of a new Arvest Bank building. Looking at the existing zoning map, we can see that the entire property is zoned C2, which is the general business district. If approved, the rezoning would take that to the CP1 planned central business district. In the aerial view of the site, you can see 2 existing buildings, a 2-story office building, and Arvest Bank's current location in the dance studio on the east end of the site. The preliminary development plan shows the 2 existing buildings with the new bank building constructed at the west end at the northeast corner of Sycamore and Main Street. Zooming in a little bit closer on the new portion of the development, you can see the new bank with the 3 drive-through lanes plus the ATM lane and the parking area to be expanded on the east side. So the elevations are not usually finalized until the final development plan, but these do appear to generally meet the architectural design requirements. So the property is about 2 acres. The bank would be allowed without rezoning. However, the bank wishes to share parking with the 2 existing buildings, which requires a planned zoning district. Minor changes to the existing development are also shown on the plan to improve pedestrian connectivity between the buildings and the parking lots for the shared parking. A traffic impact study and final stormwater management plan would be required with the final development plan. This has actually been to public hearing several times. It was continued a couple of times, the applicant's request and staff's request. And then ultimately the Planning Commission on July 24th recommended approval to the City Council. No members of the public spoke during those hearings. Commissioner Godwin did add a stipulation relating to an additional sidewalk to improve the connectivity between the existing buildings. So as I mentioned, the Planning Commission's recommend approval with the stipulations shown on your screen. Are there any questions for staff?
With the stipulation about the added sidewalk, was that taken back to the developer, and did they have any concerns about not being able to work with that?
There was a question.
Go ahead, Amy.
There was a question from the applicant at the meeting about their ability to get a sidewalk installed on the property that won't belong to them. But that's the common problem with preliminary development plans. A lot of times there's multiple property owners, and obviously the owner of that property is in on the plan as well, and so that's something that they would have to agree to.
Is this project eligible for the downtown enhancement district?
The two existing buildings are in the downtown enhancement. And those two properties have been receiving rebates, I believe, this year or next year is their last year to receive those rebates. Yeah, the rebates will expire with the 2012 tax year, so.
So it's one owner getting the rebate for both the undeveloped land and the...
There's no rebates on undeveloped land. The rebates are only for improvements.
Okay.
Those two properties are receiving the rebates. The new bank building would not be eligible because the downtown enhancement district sunsetted a couple of years ago. Yeah.
Where are we gonna, we were gonna talk about that later this, or what? Oh, no, that was the 60% abate policy, I think, right? We were gonna talk about. Yeah, okay, never mind. Got my abatements mixed up.
That's okay. Any other questions?
One other question. The sidewalk that Commissioner Godwin was interested in seeing put in place, is that to bring it up to any kind of code or to bring it up to any kind of design standard, or is that just something that he wanted to see between the properties?
Well, his concern was that with the shared parking scenario, it's important for the buildings of the parking lots to all be connected to each other. The only way to get from the existing building on the east to the other parking areas to the west, or to get from that parking lot on the east to the buildings to the west, was to actually walk through the parking lot. So he felt that from a pedestrian safety standpoint, it was important to make that very short connection of the sidewalk from the...
So the existing sidewalk along Main is inadequate for that?
Well, that would require going back out to the street and then going around. This would be an internal connection on the north side of the parking lot.
Okay, I'm looking at the plans here, and I'm probably not as familiar with these as the planning commissioners are, but where all is parking for the new prototype bank bridge?
Okay, the new bank parking is an expansion of the existing parking lot for the two-story office building that's next to it. And then there are 5 additional spaces that would be used for employees that are to the north side of the drive-through, parallel parking spaces.
Okay, well, we're talking about putting that at the north side, so back of the property.
No,
From Main Street.
this would connect the two existing buildings. So this, where there's stairs at the northeast corner of the existing office building, there's a new sidewalk that would be put in right there to connect that parking lot, but it only connects that west edge of the parking lot. And there's an existing sidewalk in front of the existing big dance studio. So this is a connection that's, I'm not sure of the length, but it looks like maybe 100 feet to just connect those two sidewalks together to facilitate people walking between the buildings.
So that's the sidewalk that is on the west end of the dance studio parking lot that runs north to the stairs. That's the
Correct.
sidewalk that's being added?
Yeah. It's about 9 parking spaces, so about 81 feet roughly.
So that, in order to accommodate this, the parking in the dance studio lot had to be included in the development to get the numbers, is that?
Yes, the existing office building is not completely full, and depending on how the service floor area works out, it was really close. The bank wanted to, well, the bank will need additional parking spaces, so
basis, what that would require is that the office building would be borrowed from the Big Wicked Studios. So really, what this would do is it would have an agreement for all three buildings to share all of the parking lots. I think so, it should work out well with the way the uses and when their peak hours are.
Amy, how about the monument? Do we know any details about the monument on the southwest corner?
And the sign was commented separately, so all they would show on the plan is the location.
Further questions? That would be ordinance number
2402.
2402. How would council like to proceed with ordinance 2402?
I move that we pass ordinance number 2402, approving rezoning request Z1201, subject to the stipulations as listed.
Second. Motion, Freeman, second for Gorsuch, that we pass ordinance 2402. Freeman.
Yes.
Gorsuch.
Yes.
Bodovich.
Yes.
Morrow.
Yes.
Harrison.
Yes.
2402 passes. New business item number 2, consider passing an ordinance terminating and releasing of record a temporary turnaround easement on Mead Court in Aspen Creek 4 subdivision. And this would be ordinance number 2403.
This is an issue that's been going on for a while. The subject temporary turnaround was installed as part of Aspen Creek 4 in 2004. Basically, the purpose of the temporary turnaround under our code is anytime you have a dead-end street or a street that's going to be extended in the future with more than basically 3 lot frontages, the developer is required to put a temporary turnaround in to facilitate traffic, basically so folks do not use driveways to make the turnaround. In this case, the adjacent property owned by Mr. Cook was recently platted, or recently zoned for residential. At the time the developer visited with Mr. Cook, he agreed and signed a temporary turnaround easement for this turnaround. It was constructed as part of the project. The temporary turnaround instrument basically says it's for temporary or public use on a temporary basis, and it will remain in effect until the road is extended. In February of 2011, Mr. Cook closed the turnaround with cable. He and I had some discussions. Basically, he had advised that his attorney had said he had liability for it. I discussed it with Mr. Hubbard, and his opinion was that the liability was the same as any individual would have for a public road. Be that as it may, we realized that basically the best thing to do is to try and seek some sort of resolution of this issue. I just had my staff install barricades on it to protect the public from a cable stretched across a public street. Discussed the matter with council in May of last year. Basically gave 3 options. We could vacate the easement, we could either condemn or seek a court order or try to negotiate the acquisition of this easement. Retain the land company to negotiate with Mr. Cook. John Amrine with that company made several contacts early last summer. However, we stopped that process to concentrate on an easement we needed from Mr. Cook for the 183rd Street project, which, by the way, he did grant. We were able to construct the project, improve drainage, and hopefully he feels as we do the project was a success. We didn't pursue it again until this summer just because the safety issues had been resolved with the barricades. It wasn't a high priority. At my request, Mr. Amrine made contact with Mr. Cook in June. pitched an offer of $2,000 for it. Mr. Cook declined that and suggested that the city acquire his entire tract. Mid-July, Mr. Cook met with Councilmember Harrison, interim city administrator Preston, and myself. It was agreed that we would present consideration of terminating the easement to council on the 20th of August. Mr. Cook also asked that the city remove the cul-de-sac. Typically with these cul-de-sacs, they are removed by the developer when the road is extended. At this time, we basically have two options, to proceed with terminating the easement or to proceed with acquisition through eminent domain. The other item for consideration is whether or not to remove the temporary turnaround. We received estimates from contractors for that work, somewhere between $500 and $7,300. Had two contractors look at it. Just for reference, the cost to condemn is approximately $7,500. With that, we'd recommend terminating the easement. We haven't received any complaints from the folks adjacent to it. We have to answer any questions.
He still owns the Circle Drive, right?
Mr. Cook owns the fee to the land. There is a temporary easement that remains in effect till the road is extended. But yes, he has the underlying title to the land.
So the easement protects, we protect him against any liability, because even though he owns the property, we have the easement. Is that how that works?
Yeah, our insurance would be primary. If somebody had an accident, they might sue both parties, but we'd have primary responsibility for the roadway.
Because it's considered public?
Well, it was dedicated to the city, the temporary easement, so.
What do the barricades look like? Can't they be left there? It seems a shame to tear up, well, number one, it seems a shame to have to spend money on removing the asphalt. I guess, where's the developer that poured the asphalt?
Well, the developer for the asphalt would be, should Mr. Cook or someone else choose to develop his property, then that would be the developer, because it would be, the extension would be onto his property. So that's the curiosity or the oddity of this particular temporary turnaround easement. Typically, they're done on the developer's property. For whatever reason, the parties agreed to go ahead and allow the temporary turnaround to be placed on Mr. Cook's property.
Why wouldn't it be expected that the developer remove it at his cost?
Because typically what they are done is and the easement document states it will be remained in place until the road is extended. And when the road is extended, it's no longer needed, and therefore whoever is extending the road removes it and builds a legitimate road.
So we're a party to it's basically a three-way contract, is that? It's not? It's a contract between the developer and Mr. Cook.
No.
What it is the practice at the time was the developer was told, city requirements are that you provide a temporary turnaround due to the length of this dead-end street, which is planned to be extended in the future. It's up to him to either dedicate a temporary turnaround easement at the end of the street on his side of the property line. In this case, he and Mr. Cook reached an agreement of some sort, and an easement was conveyed to the city.
But that easement was given to the city.
That's correct.
Right. So it's a contract between Mr. Cook and the city.
That is correct. The easement was acquired by the developer on behalf of the city.
Well,
But the developer had to say the cost of developing the cul-de-sac is part of their development fee. The city didn't pay to lay the asphalt for the cul-de-sac.
No, that is correct. The developer who built Mead Court put the asphalt in.
but Mr. Cook wasn't, he didn't need to authorize the temporary turnaround easement, and the developer would have just had to build their own easement at the end of their property and probably eliminate a couple of houses. Is that?
Well, typically what you will find is the lots have less frontage. Many times, either one, you don't build the houses, or two, you push them back. But the more typical way you see it is on the developer's property, and somehow the two lots are adjusted.
I'm assuming he got a pretty good deal because, like you said, he basically was able to build, it appears, at least two houses, then a third on that he would not have been able to, maybe not been able to develop.
Very likely.
So, has this come up before? Have we ever had a situation where,
To my knowledge, this is the only time we've had a temporary cul-de-sac on an adjacent property. If
so
we
can we
do-
prevent that in the future?
I think it would be something to definitely prevent in the future. Unless you say, get a signed contract and the city's a party to it and says, this is fine, I plan to do it. But, yeah, given the history on this thing and if going forward, be discouraged unless there's some sort of definite acknowledgement on the part of all parties that, yes, indeed, I consent to this. Now, not an attorney, but obviously if someone signs an agreement, they're obviously going into it with their eyes open.
Well, this agreement was signed
2004.
8 years ago.
Mhm.
At some point, you probably have to figure that
Things-
the road's not going to be built or
Sure.
it's purely speculative at that juncture.
I think at the time it was done, and I can't speak for Mr. Cook, but obviously for whatever reason he had rezoned his property, probably anticipated that, times were great, business was booming, and, obviously things have changed.
Jim, I have a question from you. Just looking at the original agreement, one of the terms that's speaking in there is, essentially releasing the city of Gardner from any and all liability for damage to the remaining land. Would that even pertain in financial means as well? I think so, that because that cul-de-sac there decreases property values, it doesn't,
Yeah,
that protects us from that as well with that verbiage.
yeah, that really doesn't come into play in this issue. Your choice is, you could try to enforce that agreement. Obviously, he's going to continue to put some kind of a barricade on
Right.
that cul-de-sac. We could take him to court, have some judge tell us whether that, how long a temporary easement lasts.
Right.
And a judge might say, you signed it, it's enforceable, take your cable down. Or a judge might say, hey, that was supposed to be a temporary easement, times have changed, we're not gonna allow the city to enforce that after this long a period of time. We don't know, what a judge would rule. The other options are, obviously, you acquire the property with condemnation. We can't tell you for sure what that would cost, but he's already got that piece of the property encumbered by an easement. So typically an appraiser looking at it would say, well, it's not worth much, it's already encumbered by a temporary easement. So hopefully you could acquire it for a decent price. Or you release it, as, the staff is suggesting now, just to Mr. Cook obviously is going to continue to make it an issue and bring it up with council members until he feels like he gets some satisfaction from the city.
Now, with what we have in front of us today, just by passing the ordinance, we're not committing to paying for the cost of the removal. That's just
No.
removing terminating and releasing a record, the temporary turnaround. So we're not voting to say we'll pay to have it removed, but we will release you from the temporary turnaround?
That's,
So they're two separate issues, aren't they?
that's what
Two separate actions?
that's what you're saying. You'd like Mr. Cook to say, hey, if you'll release it, I'll release you from any responsibility for removing the pavement. If he won't agree to that, and you go ahead and release it, then, there is the potential that he would sue the city to have it removed, and we don't know what some judge might say. He might say, well, it was your easement, since you released it, we think the city ought to have responsibility for removing it. We don't know whether that would happen or not.
If that were the case, and I understand hypotheticals,
Yeah.
but wouldn't some of that come back to the developer? I think Larry kind of went that way as well. Wouldn't that come back to the developer to say, you laid this, understanding there'd be future, so, it was your money that laid that asphalt, it should be your money that takes it out?
Is that-
Or the landowner who owns the land?
Is that developer still even around?
He's still around, yeah, but he would probably argue that, well, I did what I was told.
Yeah.
But according to this, it says he didn't expect to have asphalt laid on his property.
that it was gonna be a gravel
Well,
or something,
Well,
I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming that when we signed that on his behalf, or, I'm sorry, on the developer's behalf, it was specified what kind of a turnaround, or was it?
Well, it was pretty obvious it was gonna be an asphalt, that's
The
what the
standard-
street was gonna be.
yeah, the standards today were asphalt.
Yeah.
There was never an option for gravel from the city side.
And if I were the developer, I would say, why should I remove it? I got an easement, it's still there, it's still valid. You know, it'll stay there till the road gets extended.
And the developer didn't pay anything for the easement,
Right.
did he?
Well, we don't know what he paid Mr. Cook.
It's my understanding from talking to both Mr. Cook and the developer's office that it was conveyed no charge.
Okay. Now, you said that if we wanted to pursue condemnation and then domain to get that, it'd probably cost around $7,500.
That's the ballpark, yes.
Ballpark figure. Cost to make the property whole again is
Somewhere-
$5,000 to $7,300.
Correct.
You know, if we don't make the property whole again, it kind of puts a little keyhole slot in what's a pretty uniform-looking property.
If we remove the easement, if we vote to remove the easement and leave that in place as it is, who's liable for anything on, that happens in that turnaround? Mr. Cook, right?
Yes, it would be.
So that's why, from my perspective, I think, my opinion is, we terminate the easement and we remove it. I do not think that it is fair that now all of a sudden, we decide to terminate it, and now he's got something on his land that's been placed there in some sort of, which was supposed to be temporarily, and now he's responsible for whatever happens on there.
The flip side of that, and I certainly understand that, but it doesn't appear to me, although I missed some of the initial meetings because of the timing of it, it wasn't on a whim that we're coming to remove or releasing the temporary turnaround. I think it's because the road was blocked and now we've been forced to make a play. So it's not like we're coming and saying, we just want to do this out of the blue. It's kind of our hands been forced. So that dictates the terms. I really don't have an issue with removing and releasing the temporary turnaround, but I'm not sure that it is our cost to bear for removing that asphalt. And I don't know if it's pursued, Jim. I mean, is it something, in your most humble of opinions as our legal counsel, is it something that is worth saying, no, we shouldn't pay that money, and if he decides to take that to the next level, is worth
Well, the worst case, some Georgia orders you to remove it, and you know what it'll cost you to remove it.
Well, it'll cost us more to wait for that judge to tell us not to, or to wait for that judge to tell us.
If it happens, if he takes you to court.
Right.
Yeah. I would say, you know, and I don't know if that's the way that you meant for it to sound, but you made it sound like Mr. Cook hung this cable on a whim. You know, there's a letter in here from his insurance agent. Having talked to Mr. Cook about this, you know, the reason that he hung the cable was on the advice of his insurance agent, and apparently he's talked to legal counsel himself as well. So if we were to do what Councilmember Harrison's saying, which I agree with, we make the property whole, the problem goes away for less than if we tried to condemn the property and would remove the threat of, if we released it but didn't make the property whole, we might still be open for litigation, I would guess.
Yeah.
Is that true? Okay.
Yeah, if you don't remove it, there's the possibility that he may try to force you to remove it.
So, yeah, I'm of the opinion that we release it, we make the property whole,
Now,
and
actually,
move on.
clarification there, are we making the property whole, or are we just removing the asphalt? Are we coming back and sodding places, are we making this a good 10,000 pieces,
So basically
square
what
foot
you
piece of
do
land, or
is
just getting asphalt out?
you get the pavement out, grade it off, seed it, and walk away.
But again, the decision was not both of those things.
Yeah.
It was one of those things, which kind of begs the question, Seems like we're in a negotiation phase here. Why are we talking about this here and not in an executive
Well,
session?
I
It is a land,
I guess let me restate what the decision's facing. You have one option, which is just to release it. The minimum we would do is release it, put up permanent barricades, we're done. The
that's,
other
that's an option.
That's an option. The other option is to release it, direct staff to get a contractor to remove it, reseed it, and then we're done. And we still, regardless, we're putting up end of road signs.
Just signs or
Well,
concrete barricades?
If the pavement was left, we'd just put up permanent type 3 barricades. If the pavement was removed, the standard is basically the diamond-shaped signs on posts, about 3. And then Mr. Cook would have the prerogative to fence across on his property or whatever he wishes to do. But we would put up basically a standard end-of-road signing for it.
So what is the risk of just putting the barricade there and not, that's the least cost option that, I mean,
You mean not terminating the easement?
well, no, terminating the easement and putting the barricade there and not having it removed, I mean.
Well, I think you're only, as we discussed, you're only, would be whether or not he tries to go to court and force you to remove the asphalt from the cul-de-sac.
Which, I mean, let's all look at it, if it was our land, and you want to try and sell it, and you have this big thing of asphalt, I mean, somebody's going to have to do something. So the question is, I mean, I guess, from my perspective, what's the right thing to do?
And tell me again, where the developer's out of the picture, why?
Well,
I mean,
developer-
the
well, I
contract, we
think-
did this all because of him.
Well,
I mean-
the developer built the lot, he's done. I think if you came back, and once again, I'd have to defer to Jim, I mean, we could say, oh gosh, please pay to remove this, and he'd probably say, go fish, and then we'd probably be back in court too.
But-
So, you know,
Because he was meeting the requirements of the city when
he
he
met
put
the
that in.
requirements of today, yes, sir.
We're talking about this in 2012. We were talking about this in 2004, when it originally happened. It was viewed as a temporary easement because things were very temporary at the time. And there was a high degree of likelihood that development was going to continue. I don't know if the developer and Mr. Cook were having conversations about some or all of that property. Regardless, you know, the easement was acquired by the developer so they could build. There was a means apparently to allow that developer to build the lots, build the homes there on those lots. There was nothing in writing defining temporary as 4 years, 8 years, or 20 years. In Mr. Cook's mind, temporary has
Expired.
So, you know, either way, you know, from the standpoint of you know, acquisition of the entire piece is not feasible. I don't think that that's really the right way to go. You know, acquisition of the land around the easement may make it more convenient for plowing, but as it stands, I think the plows can just move the snow to the end of that dead end, right? There's no need to, and then back up, is that?
That's basically, yeah, they just push it through.
Push it through. And then the only other question is from the standpoint of fire, you know, and then that again, it would be move in and have to back out in order to address a fire situation at the end of that road.
So we don't know what will happen with this road in the future. I mean, this property is now zoned for single-family residential.
It would be
Right.
basically up to Mr. Cook or whoever he may choose to sell the land to as to what happens to it. You know, it may redevelop, it may not, but currently it's owned by Mr. Cook, and someday it may change, but I don't think he knows at this point either.
If we left his asphalt for him, at least he'd have a little part of the street already paved, of course, he'd probably have to do it again, I'm sure, by that time, but,
Yeah.
I mean, is there a compromise that we pay somewhere in between the, offer price and the $5,000 it's gonna take to remove it, and
That I don't have an answer on.
just leave the, do away with the easement, but leave the asphalt there? I mean, again, this seems like, to me, something we should be talking about in executive session. I mean,
We're not acquiring land.
is that
Yeah, you
but we
can't.
are negotiating on,
No.
I mean,
We're not, unless, I mean, if you wanna say, no, we need to come back and talk about acquisition, then we stop this action and we go back and.
As I see it, it's an all or nothing decision. You basically, you have three choices. Number one, you elect to retain the easement, which means then you would need to be prepared to proceed with the process to acquire it by eminent domain. Option two is to release the easement and do nothing more, in which case Public Works would install permanent barricades and the land would be released. Mr. Cook would have asphalt in his land. Option three is you release the easement, direct staff to remove the pavement and basically reseed the land. And if we did with that option, what we would do is we would basically get the approval of the ordinance. We would hold the ordinance, so we would have the right of access to get in there to remove it at such time as the work was done, then we'd file the ordinance or publish the ordinance.
I think we ought to go with option three and return the land, whole and move on down the road. No pun intended. I mean, it's pretty simple.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that Mr.
Cook?
Cook had just helped us on 183rd Street by granting an easement there. So, obviously, when it makes sense for him as a property owner, he's glad to help out, and this one sticks in his craw. I'm with Randy and Christie on this.
So, how would council like to proceed with ordinance number 2403?
I move we pass ordinance number 2403, terminating and releasing of record a temporary turnaround easement on Mead Court and Aspen Creek for subdivision.
second.
Huh?
Second.
Motion, Harris.
I was gonna, do I need to put something in there about the removal of the
Mm-hmm.
asphalt? Do I
Well,
need to say that in the motion?
Yeah, I would probably, as part of the motion,
Including
and direct staff to,
the direct staff to remove the asphalt at a cost not to exceed $7,300.
okay.
Still with the second?
Second, yes.
Okay, motion Harrison, second Podovich, that we pass ordinance 2403 and direct staff to remove the asphalt that is there present. Further discussion? Harrison,
Yes.
Podovich,
Yes.
Gregorczyk,
Yes.
Morrow,
Yes.
Freeman.
Yes.
2403
Yeah,
passes.
thank you.
Thank you, David. New business item number 3, consider adopting the fiscal year 2013 budget. Laura?
This is the culmination of a process that began in June. We had 6 presentations on the budget session, and as required by Kansas law, we had a public hearing on August 6th to receive public input, and there was no public input. If you would like me to read this into the recording, I don't know how council wishes me to do. General fund has 40% reserves. As discussed, the debt service fund, also known as the bond and interest fund, has cash flow issues due to special assessment delinquencies, currently at 22.5%. I did not include any collection of those special assessments in the 2013 revenue projections because that would not have been best practice, because I have no idea when they will come. Should there be any special assessment collection, that will change the need for possibly using the general fund to cover some debt service in the park sales tax fund. Water and wastewater funds, in the past, water has helped the sewer development fund as well as the water development fund. They were kind of cross-transferring. Staff tried to separate those, this 2013 budget, for the purpose of more clearly showing which funds need the most help for rate increases. And that has resulted in a proposed 8% increase for water and an 11% increase for sewer. Total impact for that to an average residential customer. And when I say average, we have a certain number of customers that we follow all year, every month, so we use that same set. That's about $7.95 per month.
That's based on how many gallons per month?
I think it was 5,400 or something like that. It's the combination of those same 5 people.
Well, I mean, but really, 5 people use, from what I understand, 2,000 gallons a person.
Well, it's 50.
So that's really
54,
2.5, that's
55.
almost 3 people's worth.
But for consistency, it's the same thing we use every time we present these figures.
Right, but
It's the
for my,
same set.
for my needs, it's how many people are in your family, and this would appear to be only half of the cost. If it's true, from what I've been told in the past, it's 2,000 gallons a month per person. I'm just pointing that out. That's all.
I get it. If all 6 of my kids came to live with me, I'd use a whole lot more than 5,400, but.
Right.
Well, but there are people out there that will have certainly a lot higher bills than $79.
But that's why it's an average,
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
there's single person homes as well.
Yeah.
As discussed, the Electric Utility Board makes the electric budget decisions. You did have a presentation from Director Krawcheck regarding the electric funds, and they had a budget that spent all their revenue projections. So revenues to expenditures was exactly the same, and they had no fee increase. All of the parks funds are supporting the parks sales tax fund due to the economic decline and the lack of excise tax and the lack of sales tax. There's not enough money to do park projects, and what park money we have all goes to pay the debt service. That's lacking in the park sales tax fund. The good news on that is the debt service does mature by 2016. So we will get through that, but that is what's happening right now and projected to happen unless we get money from the delinquent special assessments and the bond and interest fund, and that gives you some more options. The street improvement fund, due to the decline in building activity, there isn't as much excise tax being collected for street debt, street-related debt. So the special highway fund is picking up a considerable amount of that. As discussed, we talked about in one of the sessions, special revenue funds. Those are restricted as to their use. You cannot use them to plug holes in the general fund. You cannot use them for wastewater or water. You must use them for the purpose what they were collected. And with that, we have the Economic Development Reserve Fund. That's from your transient guest tax. And per recommendation of the Economic Development Council, the major change in that is to return the funding from the Southwest EDC back to the general fund, which is where it was for all but 2 years. The Special Alcohol and Drug Fund is, the revenues are generated by a levy of 10% alcoholic beverages sold at clubs and restaurants. And that money almost all goes to the school district, and it's directed on where those funds go, but most of it goes to the school district to use for drug education. The Administrative Benefit Fee Fund is the revenues generated from fees we charge to special benefit districts. We use that to transfer back to the general fund to recoup the cost of administering those. The Law Enforcement Trust Fund is if you should get some drug money seized by the police, you can use that per city code for everything, many things except normal operating expense. And those were your special revenue funds. Internal service funds, you remember that's building maintenance, IT, utility billing, and risk services. Those are all charged back to all the other funds, general water, sewer, whatever, for their portion of what they use in those so they're self-funded. And Capital Improvement Reserve, there's nothing in there except anything related to the airport, and it's covered by grants and the airport board's reimbursement. And the Stormwater Fund, actually, there's no projects and there's no funding.
Hey, Laura, I have a quick question.
Okay.
When do we vote separately on the water and sewer?
You will, and at council's direction, you asked for that to be put to a later date that you have not yet determined, but you will vote on that. There's some fees that There's a fee resolution that we have, and that would include some of the lake fees we were talking about, dock fee, last meeting. And then you will vote on the utility rate increases at a later time, that's your determined.
Prior to January.
You need to be prior to January.
So I guess my question is, if, and I don't know when that'll be, but if, let's just say it's December, if we could wait till December, if we have a feeling for, or we see some special assessment stuff come in, can that be, is that one of the items that we can relook at and say, maybe we don't have to raise as much? Or once we submit this with those proposed increases, is that it?
I would not count on anything from the bond and interest fund being available for your utilities, because your utility has the ability to fund from rate increases, which is what staff has proposed, and your bond and interest fund is a tax levy on property.
Okay.
So I would not recommend mixing those. I think you should keep your rate-based utilities with rates.
Okay.
Laura, I've got a question for you, and I don't know if I'll say it right, but back to the general fund, we're at 40%.
Currently projected.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. What is the state's ideal percentage for a municipality such as us?
When you're talking about best practice, not necessarily the state.
Yeah.
It's,
Is that 20, 25?
it's 25.
Okay. We're looking pretty good then.
We're looking very good at this. Projected.
Yeah.
Use the word projected, but yes, we are looking good right
We're
now.
projected to look pretty good.
Yes, we are projected to look pretty good. That is correct.
Other questions? How would council like to proceed?
I move we approve the fiscal year 2013 budget as proposed.
Second.
Motion Morrow, second Freeman, that we adopt the proposed 2013 fiscal year budget. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Thank you, Laura. New business item number 4, consider passing ordinance number 2404 to vacate certain recorded utility easements on Lot A of the roads addition.
Mayor, I'm going to go grab someone from the UB meeting.
UB, okay, very good.
While she's gone, please remember to sign the budget. I'm going to go ahead and go.
You take it off?
Yeah, and Doreen's got that, so.
All right, very good. We are on new business item number 4. Consider passing ordinance number 2404 to vacate certain recorded utility easements on Lot A of the roads addition.
Okay, I can address that. Down at 183rd and South Center Street, on the southwest corner, the medical clinic there, they've put an expansion on their building, and as a result, the existing underground service to the building had to be relocated. The existing service was setting on an easement that had been given to the city back when the building was built. Gardner Energy has got a new easement from them for the new service, and they are vacating, we want to release and vacate the old easement.
So that old easement was 10 feet wide and how long?
Larry, probably, I don't know, 100 feet long.
And so now the new easement is 10 feet wide and
Yeah.
same all the way to the street? Or,
No, the old easement was on the west side of the building. The new easement, I think, is on the south side of the building.
but that easement goes pretty much all along the homes.
You know, I can't answer that, Larry, I'm
Is there a
sorry.
picture of it at least that we can pull up?
Yeah, it's on the south side of the new building, and there's a large,
But it's along the fence line though, right?
no,
No.
That's not it?
no. There's a large open
Field.
field
Mhm.
between, there's probably, 300 feet between the easement and the back fence of that south neighborhood.
So, okay, so it's basically just on the other side of the parking lot? Is that what you?
Yes.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Sure.
So Bill, when you relocated those facilities in the old easement, so you literally moved them, you didn't just install new facilities?
We actually just removed and scrapped out the old
Okay,
facilities,
okay.
Christie, and installed new
Okay.
underground, yes. Mhm. And there were no other utilities in that easement, just us.
Okay.
How would council like to proceed with ordinance 2404?
I move we pass ordinance number 2404 to vacate the 10-foot utility easement on the west side of Lot A in Rhodes Addition subdivision as filed in the Register of Deeds office in book 5518, page 145.
Second?
Motion Harrison, second Gregorczyk, that we pass ordinance 2404. Harrison?
Yes?
Gregorczyk?
Yes.
Morrow?
Yes.
Freeman?
Yes.
Bodovich?
Yes.
2404 passes.
Thank you.
Bill?
Thank you, Bill.
New business item number 5, consider passing ordinance number 2405, authorizing the mayor to execute a loan agreement with the state of Kansas, acting through the Kansas Department of Health and Environment for the purpose of obtaining a loan from Kansas Water Pollution Control Revolving Fund for the purpose of financing a wastewater treatment project and establishing a dedicated source of revenue for repayment of such loan and authorizing and approving certain documents in connection therewith, and authorizing certain other actions in connection with the loan agreement. David?
This is the, basically this final step toward getting the revolving loan through KDHE. This is to fund the joint project with Edgerton, basically all the work that's going in from Waverly Road west. Our share of that work is about $6.945 million. Based on the documents that they've submitted, the interest rate on this loan will be no more than 2.4% per annum. The project, as we've talked it several times in the past, what it does is takes the southwest part of our service area, sends it to Edgerton. What it does is relieve the pressure on expansion of the Kill Creek plant. It relieves pressure on the expansion of our Bull Creek lift station by doing this work and sending it toward Edgerton. We've demonstrated it is over the long term, a cost savings. It also will open up our service area in the southwest to development. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
So if this doesn't get approved, then we finance it how?
If it doesn't get approved, then you would have to finance it through general obligation bonds, which would cost you more than these. These loans let you avoid some of the charges to get set up, and also the rates are very favorable. So this is a lower cost financing alternative.
The other advantage to KDHE loans, as I recall, is that we can modify the terms without issue, whereas if it's bonded
That is correct.
debt, the term is established at that point. So
Right.
we can extend, which we have extended KDHE loans in the
That is
past
correct.
to manage cash flow. We could also compress those loans at a certain point if needed as well.
And one thing we will be returning to you, there is another piece of this project, which is the Gardner only, which would be for a gravity sewer and a lift station to be located on the east side of Wing. And once we've got the costs finalized on those, we'll be returning with an amendment to this document.
And that will bring the amount up to what?
Probably in the $9 to $10 million range.
Other questions? How would council like to proceed with ordinance 2405?
I move we approve ordinance 2405.
Second.
Motion Harrison, second Freeman, that we approve ordinance 2405. Harrison.
Yes.
Freeman.
Yes.
Bodovich.
No.
Morrow.
Yes.
Gregorczyk.
Yes.
2405 passes. New business item number 6, consider authorizing the city administrator to execute a contract with McEvan Incorporated for the downtown generator replacement project. David.
The downtown storage facility is located at Sycamore and Shawnee. It consists of a 1 million gallon above ground tank, which we've been investing in renovation. Also consists of a 1 million gallon below tank. When this was constructed many years ago in the 50s, water was pumped from our plant at Gardner Lake, dumped into the underground tank, pumped into the above-ground tank, and then with the pumping system was distributed. And the predominant direction of pumping was to the south. With the construction of the 183rd Street tank, we were still pumping to the south. This facility represents 1 million gallons of our 3.5 million gallons of storage. Industry standards recommend that you should have storage equal to 1 day's worth of production. Last year, our daily peak was 3.3 million gallons a day. This year, we're now at 3.6 million gallons was our peak this summer. So we are right at the cusp of needing more storage. So it's a very vital facility to maintain adequate storage for fire flows. Case in point, when we had that water main rupture back in July, this extra 1 million gallons basically bought us more time. The generator at the site is a 1955 vintage military surplus unit. In the old days, when it would go down, we'd have to manually crank it up, throw the manual transfer switch, and run it. The last 10 years ago, it was kind of failing. Hasn't been running for about 2 years. The unit is, the reason of the delay is just getting the money put together. We have an extra trailer-mounted our generator at the Hillsdale water plant, which was replaced by a stationary unit when we expanded the plant. This unit was used for the intake structure. This contract with McEvan for $40,800 would take that existing 160 kilowatt unit, basically fit it into a permanent installation, install an automatic transfer switch at the storage facility, so instead of having to run out, crank it out, throw the switch, it would automatically shift power. Additionally, as part of that $40,800, we have a transfer switch at the plant that needs to be replaced. They do that also.